Skyrim is one of the biggest games ever made, and Bethesda stuffed it with so many hidden references that players are still finding new ones over a decade later. From recreated movie scenes to nods to completely different franchises, the world is absolutely loaded. So today, I'm breaking down every major Easter egg in Skyrim and explaining exactly what they reference. Starting with one you've probably walked right past without even realizing it, the 300 Tribute. There's a spot in the mountains just south of the Shrine to Periite where you'll find something that makes absolutely zero sense until you've seen one specific movie. A skeletal saber cat is wedged between two narrow rocks with a glass sword driven straight through its open mouth and out the back of its skull. And if that image sounds familiar, it should. This is a direct recreation of the opening scene from the 2007 film 300, where a young Leonidas lures a giant wolf into a narrow mountain pass and kills it by driving his spear straight through its mouth. The whole point of the scene is that Leonidas uses the tight terrain to his advantage, forcing the wolf into a space where it can't dodge, then lands the killing blow with surgical precision. Bethesda just casually rebuilt it with a cat skeleton and a glass sword. Here's the thing, the glass sword substitutes perfectly for Leonidas' spear because the angle and trajectory are identical. The blade enters through the mouth and exits through the skull, exactly matching the kill shot from the film. And the fact that the saber cat is fully skeletal actually works in the scene's favor, keeping the body locked in that dramatic, frozen death pose permanently. No ragdoll physics to ruin the moment. What makes this one stand out is how easy it is to miss. The location sits on elevated terrain between multiple points of interest that players naturally pass through during early exploration. You might be heading to the Lover's Stone or wandering toward Karthwasten, and suddenly there's a dead cat with a sword jammed through its face, which is, not something you see every day. It's a small detail, but it tells you everything about how Bethesda approaches world design. They'll spend time carefully positioning a skeleton between two rocks just to reference a 15-second scene from an action movie. That kind of commitment to absurdity is exactly what makes exploring Skyrim worth it. But if you think a movie reference involving a dead cat is impressive, wait until you see what Bethesda did with a certain cave full of frost trolls. The Star Wars. Frost Troll, Bleak Coast Cave, sits just to the right of the College of Winterhold, and most players who visit it have zero idea what's waiting for them inside. On the surface, it's a standard frost troll den. You walk in, you kill some trolls, maybe you're there for a companion's quest, and you leave. Simple enough. But if you actually push deeper into the cave, past the main troll chamber and into a back room that has absolutely no quest marker pointing to it, you find something that'll make any Star Wars fan lose their mind. There's a skeleton hanging upside down from the ceiling. Directly below it, sitting on the ground, is a glowing enchanted greatsword. Scattered around the floor are more bones and remains. Like this troll has been collecting meals for a while. And if that setup sounds familiar, congratulations! You've just walked into the Wampa's Cave from The Empire Strikes Back. The scene is a near-perfect recreation of Luke Skywalker's capture on Hoth. Luke gets snatched by a Wampa, wakes up hanging upside down from the ceiling of an ice cave, and spots his lightsaber sitting in the snow just out of reach. He uses the Force to pull it to his hand, cuts himself free, and slashes the Wampa on his way out. It's one of the most iconic sequences in the entire franchise. Skyrim translates the whole thing into fantasy with surprising elegance. The Wampa becomes a frost troll. The lightsaber becomes an enchanted greatsword. The frozen wasteland of Hoth becomes the frozen wasteland of Winterhold, which, honestly, not a huge creative leap on that last one. Winterhold is basically Hoth with more magic students. The best part is how easy this is to miss. Bleak Coast Cave is a marked location on your map, so finding the cave itself isn't hard, but the Easter egg room is tucked away deeper than most players bother to go. If you're there for a companion's job, you kill the trolls, grab your reward, and walk out. The skeleton hanging from the ceiling never even crosses your mind because you never see it. But here's the kicker that nobody talks about. This isn't even the first time Bethesda did this. They included a nearly identical Wampa Cave reference in Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion years earlier. Same setup, upside down body, weapon on the ground, ice creature lurking nearby. They loved this scene so much they literally built it twice across two completely different games. That's not a reference. That's a tradition. But if you think a Star Wars tribute hidden in a troll cave is creative, wait until you see what Bethesda did with a wheel of cheese in a classic arcade game. The Pac-Man Cheese Room. Somewhere in Markarth, sitting on a shelf inside Endon's house, a Bethesda developer built a tiny Pac-Man scene out of food items. And I need you to sit with that sentence for a sec. The setup is tucked away on a bookshelf, and most players will walk right through Endon's place without ever glancing at it. You're in a Dwemer-styled city full of murder mysteries and political intrigue. Nobody's checking the shelves. But if you actually stop and look, you get rewarded with one of the most absurd things ever placed in a fantasy RPG. On the shelf, a cheese wheel sits with a slaughterfish egg positioned right where its eye would be, forming the unmistakable round round shape of Pac-Man himself. Lined up in front of him, garlic bulbs, arranged in a neat little row like the dots Pac-Man chomps through on his way across the screen. There's glow dust nearby too, because apparently someone on the dev team felt the composition needed a power pellet. The whole thing looks exactly like a tiny diorama of Pac-Man mid-chomp, frozen in time on some random guy's bookshelf in a city carved into a mountain. I don't know what Endon thinks he's displaying here. Maybe it's art, maybe it's a cry for help. Here's the thing. When you actually recognize what you're looking at, it's unmistakable. The cheese wheel with the egg eye, the garlic dots lined up in front of it, the glow dust sitting off to the side. This isn't a vague, oh, maybe it looks like something situation. It's Cheese Pac-Man, built on a shelf, in a medieval fantasy game about dragons. Now, some players have debated whether this was actually intentional or just a coincidence. And look, I respect healthy skepticism, but the idea that a bookshelf just happened to contain a cheese wheel with a slaughterfish egg eye facing a neat row of garlic bulbs, with glow dust placed right there for good measure, entirely by accident, that's a harder sell than the Easter egg itself. The combination of items is too precise to be anything other than deliberate. Someone at Bethesda genuinely asked themselves, how do I build Pac-Man out of food items on a shelf? And then they did it. And then they put it in some random silversmith's house in Markarth, where almost nobody would ever notice. That's what makes this one special. It's not flagged, there's no quest pointing you toward it. You have to be nosy enough to inspect a stranger's furniture to discover that a game developer spent company time recreating a 1980s arcade character using a cheese wheel and fish eggs, which is, you know, exactly what Bethesda's budget should be going toward. But if you think a cheese-based arcade tribute is the weirdest thing hiding in Skyrim's lakes and caves, wait until you see what's sticking out of the water near Whiterun. The Lady of the Lake. After a room full of cheese wedges arranged like a 1980s arcade game, Skyrim decides to get genuinely beautiful on you. And honestly, it kinda catches you off guard. Northwest of Whiterun, tucked between rolling plains and the wind-battered rocks near Bleakwind Basin, there's a small, unremarkable lake. No map marker, no quest pointer, no NPC standing nearby going, hey, you should check out that lake. Nothing. Just water, some fish, and silence. Most players walk right past it. Some players put 500 hours into Skyrim and never even know it exists. But if you happen to look at the water at just the right angle, you'll notice something that doesn't belong. A skeletal hand reaching straight up from beneath the surface, gripping a sword. This is a direct recreation of the Arthurian legend of the Lady of the Lake, the mythical figure who rises from the water to bestow Excalibur upon King Arthur. Bethesda rebuilt the entire scene bone by bone. The hand breaks the surface at a slight angle. Heistcarp and Silverside Perch swim lazy circles around the fingers like nothing unusual is happening. The whole thing looks eerily natural, like it's always been there and you just never thought to look. Here's where it gets genuinely clever though. The sword isn't a fixed weapon. It's level, meaning it scales to match your character's level at the moment you discover it. Find it at level 5, you get a basic sword. Find it at level 40, you get something considerably more dangerous. That's not just a visual reference, that's a mechanical one. In the original legend, the Lady of the Lake doesn't hand Excalibur to just anyone. The gift is calibrated to the recipient. It's bestowed upon someone worthy. Bethesda translated that concept directly into gameplay, and most people don't even realize it, but the part that really stays with you is what happens after you take it. The moment you pull the sword from the skeletal grip, the arm snaps. The remaining bones detach and sink slowly to the bottom of the lake. And that's it. The scene is gone, permanently. You can never see it again on that save file. There's no reset, no respawn, no second chance. One interaction, and the location is altered forever. For an unmarked spot that most players never find in the first place, that level of commitment to a single moment is almost poetic. Bethesda built something beautiful, hid it where almost nobody would look, and then made it self-destruct the instant someone touched it, which is, you know, not ideal if you forgot to take a screenshot. And this isn't even the only Arthurian reference in the game, because Bethesda didn't just recreate one version of the Excalibur legend, they recreated both King Arthur and the sword. Most people know the story of King Arthur and Excalibur, but here's the thing, most people only know one version. There are actually two competing origin stories for how Arthur got his legendary sword, and Bethesda included both of them in Skyrim. We already covered the Lady of the Lake, the skeletal hand rising from the water to bestow a leveled sword upon whoever finds it. That's origin story number 1. Origin story number 2 is the one you probably grew up watching in Disney movies. The sword jammed into a stone, waiting for the one true king to pull it free. And sure enough, Bethesda built that one too. Head northeast of Markarth to Rebel's Cairn and you'll find it. A pile of rocks with a sword sticking straight out of the top. surrounded by blood, bones, and the general atmosphere of failure. The bones are the detail that sells it. In the original legend, countless knights attempted to draw the sword before Arthur. They all failed. Bethesda took that concept and made it literal. Those skeletal remains scattered around the cairn, those are the guys who tried. They came, they pulled, they died, which is, not ideal for them. Now here's where it gets interesting. Unlike the Lady of the Lake sword, which scales with your level and actually functions as a decent weapon, this one is just a plain steel sword. No enchantments, no special properties, nothing. You pull the legendary blade from the stone and it's basically worth less than whatever you looted off a bandit 10 minutes ago. The whole point of the sword in the stone was proving you're worthy of greatness. You prove it, and your reward is the most mediocre weapon in the game. Thanks, Bethesda. The real joke is that the Dragonborn just walks up and yanks it out without a second thought. No divine trial, no magical resistance. You've already killed dragons, absorbed their souls, and shouted people off mountains. Pulling a sword from a rock is basically a warm-up exercise. Oh, a test of worthiness? Let me just grab this real quick. I have a civil war to ignore. What makes both references impressive is that Bethesda didn't just throw a generic Excalibur nod into the game and call it a day. They demonstrated genuine familiarity with the multiple canonical variations of Arthurian legend. The Lady of the Lake version, where the sword is a gift. The sword in the stone version, where the sword is earned through proof of character. Two different traditions, two different locations, two different mechanical implementations. One gives you a useful weapon, the other gives you a steel sword and some dead guys. The location itself sits along a path players might naturally walk during the Legend of Red Eagle quest, but if you're focused on quest objectives and following your marker like a good little Dragonborn, you'll walk right past it. The cairn doesn't announce itself. No quest marker, no NPC pointing you toward it. Just rocks, bones, blood, and a sword that's been waiting for someone worthy for what looks like a very long time. But if you think literary references are impressive, wait until you see how many nods Bethesda packed into their own previous games. Oblivion and Morrowind callbacks. If you've only ever played Skyrim, there's an entire layer of this game you've never seen. Not hidden content, not cut quests, just references that are completely invisible unless you played the games that came before it. And Bethesda buried them everywhere. Let's start with a guy named Dreth. He's a dark elf you can find hanging around the Bee and Barb Inn in Riften. He'll talk your ear off about his family, bragging about his ancestors like they were royalty. Most players walk right past him. He's just another NPC with a forgettable name and a big mouth. But here's the thing. His ancestor is Dreth, and if that name just hit you like a freight train, congratulations. You played Oblivion. Dreth is literally the first NPC you ever interact with in the Elder Scrolls 4. He sits in the cell right next to yours at the very start of the game, and his entire purpose in life is to mock you. He insults your race, your appearance, your situation. He's the first voice you hear in a brand new playthrough, and he uses it to be the worst person alive. So, the fact that Bethesda put his descendant in Skyrim, generations later, still running his mouth in a bar, is genuinely one of the funniest long game jokes they've ever pulled. The Dreth family legacy is apparently just being insufferable. Generational talent, really. Then there's Lucien Lachance. If you completed Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood questline, you unlock an ability called Summon Spectral Assassin. Use it, and a ghostly figure materializes to fight alongside you. The game explicitly identifies him as the ghost of Lucien Lachance, the legendary Dark Brotherhood speaker from Oblivion. This isn't a vague nod. They literally brought back one of the most iconic characters from the previous game as a summonable combat ally. For anyone who spent dozens of hours following Lucian's orders in Oblivion's Brotherhood questline, hearing his voice again in spectral form is a genuine emotional gut punch, disguised as a gameplay mechanic. For everyone else, he's just a useful ghost, which is, also fine. And then there's the giant mud crab. Near a pond in the wilderness, you can find a fossilized mud crab skeleton that is absolutely massive, way bigger than any living mud crab in the game. This directly references one of Oblivion's most persistent community legends. Players swore there was a giant mud crab somewhere in Cyrodiil. Stories got passed around forums for years, growing more ridiculous with each retelling. Bethesda took that myth and made it real in Skyrim, except the creature's already dead and fossilized. Almost like they're saying, yeah, it existed, you just missed it by a few thousand years. What makes all of these callbacks special is how they operate on two completely different frequencies. If you've never touched Oblivion, Dreth is just some guy. Lucien Lachance is just a ghost. The mud crab skeleton is just a weird thing by a pond. The game never stops to explain any of it. There's no pop-up that says, hey, this is a reference to our previous title. These Easter eggs exist purely as rewards for the people who were there. Character callbacks, gameplay mechanics, environmental storytelling. Three completely different methods of honoring franchise history, all woven into a single game so seamlessly that most players never even notice the stitching. But if you think legacy references are impressive, wait until you see see what Bethesda hid at the highest point in the entire game, the Notched Pickaxe. At the very top of the throat of the world, the tallest mountain in all of Skyrim, there's a pickaxe jammed into the rock. It looks exactly like every other pickaxe in the game. Same model, same texture, nothing special. But pick it up and you'll notice it has a unique name, the Notched Pickaxe, and it carries 2 enchantments, a smithing boost and bonus shock damage. No other pickaxe in the game does either of those things. It's a one-of-a-kind item sitting at the highest reachable point in the entire world, and most players walk right past it. So what's it referencing? The answer depends on who you ask, and both sides make a strong case. The widely accepted explanation is Minecraft. Notched Pickaxe is a direct reference to Notch, the original creator of Minecraft, and the pickaxe is arguably the most iconic tool in that entire game. But this wasn't just a random tribute. It was allegedly a peace offering. Before Skyrim launched, Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax got into a legal dispute with Mojang over a trademark. Mojang was developing a card game called Scrolls, and ZeniMax looked at their billion-dollar franchise called The Elder Scrolls and said absolutely not. Eventually, they settled. Mojang agreed not to use Scrolls as a standalone trademark, and everyone moved on. The Notched Pickaxe, according to this theory, was Bethesda's way of saying no hard feelings, a little digital olive branch buried at the top of a mountain, which is, kind of sweet for a company that just threatened to sue someone into the ground. But there's a second theory, and this one's darker. In 1924, British mountaineer George Mallory attempted to summit Mount Everest with his climbing partner Andrew Irvine. They were spotted high on the northeast ridge, then the clouds rolled in, and neither man came back. Mallory's body was found preserved on the mountain 75 years later, but his ice axe was never recovered. What searchers did find was Irvine's ice axe in 1933, lying on the ridge at roughly 27,000 feet. An ice axe, abandoned near the top of the world's tallest mountain. A pickaxe, found near the top of a mountain. Sound familiar? The placement is what makes this theory compelling. Bethesda didn't put this item in a chest somewhere or hide it in a dungeon. They put it at the summit of the tallest mountain in the game. If this were purely a Minecraft reference, it could have gone anywhere. A mine, a blacksmith shop, literally any cave. But they chose the peak, the highest point you can reach. The most likely answer is that it's both. The name points to Notch and Minecraft. The location points to Mallory, Irvine, and Everest. One is a lighthearted gaming industry handshake. The other is a quiet tribute to climbers who died chasing the top of the world. Both meanings work perfectly without contradicting each other. That's genuinely clever design, whether it was intentional or a happy accident. Getting up there isn't exactly casual either. The intended route requires completing the main questline's Throat of the World quest, meaning you need to progress deep into the story before you can even access the summit. Some players bypass this by hoarding stamina and jumping up the mountainside like a determined goat, which technically works but takes about 40 minutes of mashing jump against near vertical rock faces. Either way, you earn it, but if you think a mysterious pickaxe at the top of a mountain is unsettling, wait until you meet the ghost who rides through Skyrim every single night and nobody knows why. The Headless Horseman. Most Easter eggs in Skyrim sit in one place and wait for you to find them. This one finds you, or more accurately, it doesn't, because the Headless Horseman is the one secret in this entire game that most players have heard about, but never actually seen with their own eyes. Between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., a headless specter in steel plate armor spawns somewhere in Skyrim and rides a ghostly horse through the wilderness. He can't be harmed, he can't be talked to. He doesn't acknowledge you exist. He just rides, following the footpaths like he's got somewhere to be, battle axe in hand, performing 0 hostile actions. Just a dead man on a schedule. Here's where it gets interesting. If you actually manage to follow him long enough, and that's a big if because this guy does not slow down for you, he eventually leads you to Hamvir's Rest, a small, forgotten cemetery in the middle of nowhere. He stays there during the day, standing among the graves, facing the headstones. Then, when night falls, he rides again, every single night, forever. The obvious reference is Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow from 1820, and yeah, that's part of it. But the Headless Horseman as a concept is way older than Irving. German folklore has spectral revenants, headless riders cursed to wander the earth until they've atoned for their sins. The Irish have the Dullahan, who carries his own severed head under one arm and wields a whip made from a human spinal cord, which is, not ideal. Even Norse tradition gets involved, with the practice of decapitating corpses specifically to weaken their ghosts, suggesting that headlessness and supernatural punishment have been linked for centuries across multiple cultures. Bethesda didn't just reference a story, they referenced an entire continent's worth of nightmares. But here's the part that makes this one stick. The leading fan theory identifies the horseman as Ragnar the Red. You've heard the song? Every bard in every tavern in Skyrim sings it. Ragnar was a boastful warrior, famously arrogant. The the kind of guy who'd walk into a room and announce he was the most dangerous person in it. His excessive pride, his inability to shut up about himself, that's textbook revenant material in Germanic folklore. A man so consumed by vanity that death itself couldn't humble him, so instead he was cursed to ride headless through the night, unable to speak, unable to boast, unable to do the one thing that defined him when he was alive. That's poetic in a way this game doesn't usually aim for. And the cruelest part? Many players finish the entire game without ever encountering him. He spawns randomly. His window is 6 hours of in-game night. His route changes every time. You can't predict where he'll be. You can't summon him. You can't force the encounter. He exists as pure legend for the majority of the player base, a thing people talk about in forums and comment sections the same way villagers in old European towns talked about riders in the dark. Skyrim accidentally created its own urban legend inside a game full of them. There's no quest attached, no reward for following him, no lore book that explains who he was. Just a dead man in armor, riding alone through the dark toward a graveyard he can never leave, compelled by something he can't name and you can't understand. Not all stories have a point. Sometimes they're just sad and haunted from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every crime in Skyrim Explained, click the video on the screen now.